Um, Good morning and hello. A warm welcome to wherever you're joining us from. And thank you for joining today's webinar, where we're going to be talking about everyday cybersecurity for the modern workplace. My name is Abigail Angashi. I'm going to be your host for today. And joined with me is an incredible team. We have Annette, who's going to be handling the Q&A session in the Q&A box. And we also have Gift who's going to come on later and do a deep dive. So karibuni sana if you're from Kenya or wherever you're from, actually, just welcome, welcome. So even as other people are still joining us, we're going to do a little bit of housekeeping. So just to let you know that this session is being recorded. And so once the recording is ready, we're going to be sending the recording to your inbox. Also, if you have any questions or any queries throughout the entire session, the Q&A is open to all, so feel free to ask your questions and don't wait till the end, because sometimes you might tend to forget questions that you have. So feel free to ask questions throughout the entire session. Now, a little bit about us at Sibasi. We are an AI native and innovative technology company, and we're really passionate about delivering excellence and quality. And we like to deliver our services fast, what we call the digital era velocity, but we deliver it with intentionality, ensuring we empower you to be able to achieve success and impact in your in your industry. And our mission is really simple. We try to keep it simple, and it's really at the heart of our name, Sibasi, where we actually deliver services and solutions that are invested and they're integrated into your business for you to be able to achieve the success and the impact. And so we're helping organizations operate very confidently in this AI age. We are privileged to work with a number of partners. We are a Microsoft Gold partner, and really this is the highest designation of partnership. And our services and solutions, they are divided into three core areas. We have the intelligence business platforms, where if you would want solutions such as board management with our tool eBoard, or other solutions that are really off the shelf, we have those in place and they are deployable to your organization. We also have the Microsoft Digital Transformation, where you can get enterprise systems, and also the advisory and consulting support, where we offer security assessment as our core area. Now, just to do a little bit of reality check here, from the Microsoft Work Trend Index survey, we noticed that the human labor is reaching its limits, with really 80% of the global workers agree that they lacked enough time or energy. And I think most of us here can resonate with this, if not all of us. And with 53% of the leaders agreeing that the productivity must increase. So we really here you see that we are at a capacity gap. And so the question now becomes, how can we be able to make people feel supported without really asking much from them? And so if we look at it from this standpoint and in the tech scene of this 2026 tech scene, we can see that AI has really come in handy to help us take on it. It helps us in taking on more tasks and us still being in control as the humans. And this, I love how this quote really sums it up by Joel Ramjon, where he says that Copilot is a force multiplier, and AI really does a lot of the heavy lifting, so that people they help do not feel like they're falling in between the cracks. And so now that brings us to how the agents or this AI is helping us to apply existing technology in existing problems, to be able to optimize the existing processes across the organizations, and also user-led. And if you take this into account, then you can see that it's going to help you in delivering more effectively. Your team visibility is improved. Also, your workflows are improved. Communication, there's better stakeholder engagement within your stakeholders. If it's your leaders, your vendors, your clients, the communication is top notch, and also the operational efficiency and security is strengthened. And so, taking all this into together, you get to have a frontier firm or a frontier organization in this era. And so, how do we navigate this shifting world where the nature of the businesses and how work is done and how it also feels has changed, with the conventional security tools not keeping pace, because we see a rise in the cost of breaches and the regulations. So we see one key problem here is the technical debt, and attackers are aware of this and are really taking advantage of it, because not only is the attackers are not last they don't last for days, they're happening in matters of minutes and seconds. And so it is of importance that the security for organization really needs a force multiplier to be able to match up to the speed of the attacks. And as we look at the security threats that have grown tenfold, we can see that Microsoft has tracked that the threat actors are between 300 and 1500 plus, with the time for attackers to access the private data is dropping to like 1 hour, about an hour. And also, what's the surprising number is that the password attacks moved from 579 to about 7,000 attacks per second. And so, as the landscape evolves, we see that looking at the bigger picture, AI has given us the potential to not only be reactive, but to be proactive, integrated, dynamic, and automated. And so now, as we look, as with this in mind, we want to take a deep dive look into it. And we have a seasonal speaker, Gift, who's a cybersecurity expert, and he's going to be looking at cybersecurity essentials and walking us through, because he's well adapted to be able to take us through the walkthrough. So I'd want to invite him to continue.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you for that warm introduction. Just to quickly confirm, are you able to see my presentation?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so good morning, everyone, and welcome. My name is Gift. I'm a cybersecurity consultant with Logivate. And for the next hour, I'm going to do something that I believe most cybersecurity sessions get badly wrong. I'm not going to bury you in frameworks. I'm not going to throw a compliance checklist at you and call it a strategy. And I'm absolutely not going to pretend that, any of this is simple, because it isn't. So what I'm going to do is show you exactly what is happening to organizations just like yours right now inside environments that look exactly like yours, which are built on Microsoft 365. And I'm going to give you the clearest picture I can of what to do about it. Some of what you'll hear today is going to be uncomfortable, and that's actually intentional. Discomfort is how we know something matters. Okay? So let's get to it. So here's where we're going today. We're going to start with the threat landscape. So who is actually coming for your organization? How they get in, and what they are doing once they're inside your Microsoft 365 environment specifically. Then from there, we'll look at what this means in business terms, because cybersecurity is not an IT problem, it's a business problem. And I want to give you the language to actually make that case. Then we'll spend the bulk of our time on three things that actually matter most in an MT65 environment, and that is identity, data governance, and with the current times, artificial intelligence. Specifically, Microsoft Copilot, which is changing the calculus on data risk in ways most organizations haven't yet caught up with. Then we'll close with five concrete habits that every single person on your team can start implementing today, and a 90-day roadmap that gives you something to take back to your next team meeting. Yeah, so I want to start with three numbers. The first is 32%. That's the rise in identity-based attacks in just the first half of 2025. Not year over year, this is the first 6 months alone. Now, to put that in perspective, we are not talking about a gradual climb. We are talking about attackers who have industrialized their methods, who have access to AI tools just like we do, and who are running credential staffing campaigns at a scale that simply wasn't possible 2 years ago. And this is something that we see happening a lot. Now, the second number is $4.88 million. As you can see, that is the average cost of a single data breach and that this was reported in 2024. So this is not for a large enterprise. This is on average across all organization sizes. And that number includes everything. I'm talking about the forensic investigation, the legal cost, the regulatory fines, the ransom in some cases, the PR crisis, the client notifications, the operation downtime. It does not include the long-term reputational damage, which is actually harder to quantify, but often more devastating. Yeah, and the third number, the one that I think should concern you the most, is 54%. 54% is the click rate on AI-generated phishing emails. If you ran a phishing simulation in your organization 2 years ago, you might have seen a 12 to 15% click rate. That was already worrying, right? Now, what AI has done is allow attackers to personalize phishing at an industrial scale. The email is no longer from, like before, from a Nigerian prince. It's an email that looks exactly like it came from your CEO, or your CFO, written in their style, referencing like a real project that's in your CRM, sent at a time when you likely to be checking your inbox, and it's asking you to do something that sounds completely reasonable, right? So you can imagine 54% of people click it. That's actually worrying. So these aren't hypothetical numbers. So these are documented in Microsoft's own digital defense report. They're also documented in the Verizon data breach investigation report. And you can also find this in IBM's cost of a breach study. So you can imagine the most credible sources in our industry are all saying the same thing. And they're saying that the threat environment has fundamentally changed, and most organizations, unfortunately, have not changed with it. So by the end of today, I'll try and make you understand exactly why and what to do about it. Okay? Yeah. So let's start with the threat landscape. So who is actually out there? Let's look at what they want and how they are actually getting in, right? Yeah. So allow me to address something I hear in almost every organization I work with, and it usually sounds something like this, right? We're not a bank, we're not a hospital, we are not the kind of organization that ends up on the news. Why would anyone target us anyway? So here's the honest answer. They are not targeting you specifically. They're targeting everyone simultaneously. So 52% of all cyber incidents are financially motivated. That means the person behind the attack doesn't care what your business does. They care whether your credentials work, whether your environment has gaps that they can exploit, and whether they can extract something valuable, be it data, be it money, or access they can sell. And here's what makes the modern threat landscape genuinely different from 5 years ago. Now we have cybercrime as a service, right? The attacker knocking on your door today doesn't need to be like a sophisticated programmer. They can rent access to a ready-made phishing kit for as little as $20 a month. They can buy a database of compromised credentials, including yours, potentially for less than the cost of, your typical business lunch. They can pay a ransomware operator on a revenue sharing model to do the heavy lifting and just collect a percentage if the attack succeeds. So you can imagine this is a service industry now. It has vendors, it has customer support, and even in some cases, it has, satisfaction guarantees with SLAs. So imagine how crazy that is. And then there are nation state actors. So their targets are different, right? They are typically after intellectual property, government intelligence or strategic infrastructure. But their tools and techniques don't stay private. The tactics that a nation state group develops today become like the commodity attacks that financially motivated criminal uses against small and medium businesses 12 to 18 months later. So this is something that we've actually seen this pattern again and again. So the conclusion here is that everyone is a target. So the question is only whether your defenses make you hard enough than that an attacker moves to, someone easier. Okay. So how do they actually get in? Now let's talk about the three most common entry points because these actually aren't theoretical and they account for the majority of breaches we see in Microsoft 365 environments. Okay. So I'll begin with 28%. So 28% of breaches start with phishing and social engineering, right? And I want to be very precise about what phishing looks like in 2025 or 2026, because if you're picturing a badly spelled email with a dodgy link, you're behind the curve, right? So today's phishing is actually targeted. It references your organization. It uses your branding. It might come from a supplier whose email account was compromised last month. So it passes every technical filter because it's a legitimate email account anyway. The only difference is it's controlled by an attacker. And increasingly, as we established with the 54% click rate we actually talked about earlier, that particular phishing email is written by AI. Now, there's a technique called click fix that's become increasingly prevalent. You click on a link and you get what looks like an error message asking you to paste a command into your computer to fix it. I mean, it sounds absurd, but it works remarkably well. Because, at the end of the day, people are curious. People want to solve problems, and that instinct is what is being weaponized. Okay? Yeah, so then we have 18%. So 18% of breaches exploit unpatched vulnerabilities. So every month, Microsoft releases a Patch Tuesday update. Some of those patches are critical vulnerabilities that are actively being exploited in the wild. And we've seen some governments, like even in the US, maintaining a list called the known exploited vulnerabilities catalog, and it actually updates that in real time. So here's the uncomfortable reality. The average organization takes anywhere from 2 weeks to even to up to several months to apply critical patches. Now, attackers start scanning for unpatched systems within hours of a vulnerability being disclosed, sometimes even within minutes. So the math is not in your favor if you're patching on a quarterly schedule, right? Okay, so then 12% come through exposed remote services. And this one actually catches a lot of organizations off guard. right? You remember back in the day we had protocols such as SMTP or IMAP or even POP3. So these are email protocols that were designed in the early days of the internet, long before anyone thought about, things to do with multi-factor authentication. So they have no concept of an MFA challenge. So they connect to your Microsoft 365 email with nothing but a username and a password. Now, in most MT65 tenants I assess, these protocols are still enabled, which means that an attacker who has obtained a valid username and password, through phishing, through a data breach on a third-party site, through credential stuffing, can walk straight into that email account and bypass your MFA entirely, as if it doesn't exist. So think about that for a second. You've invested in multi-factor authentication. You've told your users to enable it. And then an attacker uses a protocol you forgot even existed in the first place to go around all those, defenses that you have in your organization. So that is something that we really need to watch out for. Yeah. So now I want to get very specific to your Microsoft 365 environment because there are threats that are engineered specifically for it. And understanding them changes how you think about, your defenses, right? Now, business email compromise. This is the highest volume, highest revenue crime category in cybersecurity. It's not ransomware, it's actually BEC. Now, an attacker gets access to an email account through phishing, through credential theft. They sit there quietly for days or even weeks. They read the email threads, they understand who, the CFO, the CEO, the IT manager talks to. They understand what a legitimate payment instruction looks like in your organization. And then at the moment when it's least questioned, right before a legitimate transaction, right when the CFO or finance director is on holiday, they send an email that redirects a payment. And sometimes they can even create a rule whereby they can even send an email and it gets deleted on the let's say on the user mailbox. So you can imagine AI has made this devastatingly more effective. So the email is written in the exact style of the person it's impersonating. So it references context from real threads that you have within your mailbox. It even anticipates, possible objections. So the only tell might be an account number that's, let's say, one digit different. And you see, and by the time anyone notices, the money is actually gone, right? So this is a typical example of persistent threats. So there's a concept whereby we talk about persistence, where an attacker is able to just spend some time within your environment, just collecting data or looking for patterns, just studying what happens within your space. So the whole idea is how often do you or how quickly will you actually identify if there's an unauthorized sign-in staying active within your environment. Okay. So let's look at also cloud-hosted phishing. So this one I want you to think carefully about. Your email security filters trust Microsoft domains, right? I mean, of course they do, because you're using Microsoft 365. Okay. So you have things like SharePoint.com, which is a legitimate domain. You also have OneDrive.com, which is also a legitimate domain. Now, attackers know this, so they host phishing pages on SharePoint. They store malicious files on OneDrive. Then they send links through Microsoft Teams that point to, legitimate looking pages even hosted on Azure. Now, your email filter sees, a Microsoft domain and thinks, this is a trusted sender, and lets it through. Now, this is why I usually say The whole idea of, it came from a legitimate domain is no longer a sufficient reason to trust a link. Okay? So you need to be careful about that. Then, of course, you need to be careful about, exploits the exploits that are usually delivered through, your office documents, through 0 days. So this mostly applies to unpatched CVEs. So if you have especially something like Defender within your environment, these are things that you need to be on the lookout for, because this is also how some attackers, sleep up malicious artifacts within your environment. Okay. Then we have token theft and info stealers. Now, this is the one that keeps, those of us in IT security up at night. Think about it. So when you log into Microsoft 365 and pass your multi-factor authentication check, your browser stores a session token, right? Now, that token is proof of authentication. Also it's what keeps you logged in without asking for your password again every 5 minutes. Now, info stealers are a category of malware, and we have things like Luma, we have Redline, there's a third one, we have Raccoon. So these malwares, these categories of malwares, they actually exist to find those tokens and exfiltrate them. So they look in your browser storage, they look in your cookie files, they also look in your credential stores. They actually extract your session token and send it to an attacker. Now, that attacker can then import that token into their own browser. And you see, from Microsoft's perspective, that authentication is completely valid because it's an actual validated token, right? So you can imagine here there's no MFA prompt required, there's no password needed, so just your token, replayed from a different country, looking entirely legitimate. So you can imagine how crazy that is. Now, in June last year, around 2025, around June, the U.S. Department of Justice seized 2,300 domains associated with Luma Infostealer operations. This is something you can actually check it up online. So you can imagine 2,300 domains. Now, that tells you the scale of what we are dealing with. Okay? Yeah. Now, I want us to translate what we've just talked about and add into the language of business. Because ultimately, this is a risk conversation. And with any risk conversation, we know that that risk has a cost, right? Okay. Yeah. $4.88 million. Now, let's break down what that actually buys, or rather, what it actually costs. Now, the financial impact is the most visible, right? You have ransom payments, we have legal fees, and even after a breach, you'll have legal fees whether you caused the breach or not, because you'll need counsel to navigate, your disclosure obligations. You have regulatory fines, you have GDPR, HIPAA, whichever framework apply to your business. You have forensic investigation costs. You have cyber insurance premium increases. And also, in the case of publicly traded companies, sometimes there's a market cap impact, which, if you're to look at the IBM report, which IBM estimates at an average of, a 7% drop following a significant breach disclosure. Okay. Now let's go to operational impact. So the operational impact is one that tends to be most underestimated when organizations calculate their risk. So how long does it take to recover from a breach? The answer on average is, some up to 277 days. You can imagine that's time from initial detection to containment and full recovery. So we are talking about 9 months of disrupted operations, of running on manual fallback processes, of your IT team spending, 100% of their time on incident response instead of actually supporting the business. Now, that has a cascading effect on every part of your organization. Deals don't close, projects don't complete, the staff burnouts, and some in cases, some of them even leave. And of course, we have the reputational cost, which is the one you really can't, model with a spreadsheet. The moment you have to send a notification to your clients, telling them that their data may have been compromised, that moment changes your relationship with those clients permanently. Some of them will be understanding, which is okay, which is fair. Some will not. And the conversation you'll be having in board meetings and even investor calls and client reviews for the next 2 years will include, the phrase, since the breach. That's a long shadow to live under. And it's actually entirely preventable. Okay. Now, allow me to quickly pivot. I want to speak directly to the leaders in this call for a moment. If you're in a decision-making position or you influence some of the decisions that are made within your particular industry or your organization, including IT managers, whether you're a CEO, CFO, if you're a part of a board, because these are the people who are ultimately accountable for this, right? So, cybersecurity used to be something that lived in the IT department. It was a technical problem for technical people. Now, we've seen that is no longer true, right? The regulators across every jurisdiction we operate in now hold boards and executives personally accountable for material cybersecurity failure. So, this is a governance issue. So here we have three questions that every board should be able to answer at every quarterly meeting. Not every 6 months, but at least at every quarterly meeting. So the question is, what is our MFA coverage? So not do we have MFA? What percentage of our users are actually protected? What percentage of our administrators are protected by phish-resistant MFA specifically? Because, regular MFA, as we've just discussed, can also be bypassed. Now, the next thing is, what is our patch latency on critical vulnerabilities? Now, from the day vulnerability is disclosed to the day it's patched across our environment, how many days does that take? If the answer is I don't know, that's a problem. If the answer is more than 14 days for even critical vulnerabilities, that's also a problem. So again, when did we last test our incident response plan? This is the third question. Not do we have one. So when did we last actually run through it? When did we last verify the contacts on the list are still current? When did we last confirm we could isolate an account and revoke all its sessions in under 5 minutes? If you can answer those three questions with precision and confidence, you are ahead of the majority of organizations. If you can't, this should be your starting point, actually. Okay. Yeah, I hope we're still together. Yeah. So now, I want us to talk about what we do about all of this. And we start where every modern security strategy starts, identity. Okay. Now, the old security model was built around a perimeter. You had a firewall, and everything inside was trusted. Everything outside was not. It was imperfect, but at least it was coherent in one way or the other. Now, in a world where your users work from home, from coffee shops, from hotel lobbies, from airports, where your data lives in Microsoft data centers across multiple countries, not in a server room you control, that perimeter is actually gone. There's no inside and outside anymore. Now, what has replaced it is identity. Your identity is your new perimeter. If an attacker has your credentials and can pass your authentication, they are inside your organization, regardless of where they are physically. And that's exactly what 82% of all breaches rely on. And that is a compromised identity, right? Now, the good news. And I want to be clear that there's, some significant good news in this session, not only bad news. And the good news is that the most powerful control available to you right now is also one of the most straightforward to implement when you think about it. Multi-factor authentication, deployed properly, right? Blocks 99.9% of automated password-based attacks. Not 90, not 95, but 99.9. That's a good number, right? But then again, there's a subtle issue that I see in almost every organization, and that is what we call privilege creep, right? And I'll just quickly explain this according to what you guys can see. Someone joins your company, right? They get access to the systems they need. 6 months later, they get promoted. So they get access to more systems. A year later, they move to a different team. They get access to that team's systems, but nobody revokes the access from the team they left. So 3 years in, that person has accumulated access across 5 different business areas. Now, most of it they haven't touched in months. They've become what we call, overprivileged, and they present a significant risk, not because they are malicious, but because if their account gets compromised, the attacker inherits every single one of those permissions. Now, add Microsoft Copilot or any AI solution that you use to that environment. In this case, Copilot doesn't just inherit the current permissions. It can synthesize, it can summarize, it can surface data from everything your identity can access. So privilege creep, which was always a risk, has just become an active AI-powered data exposure. Think about it, right? So that's why I usually say that's why identity governance, specifically privileged identity management, reduces breach severity by 3.8 times. And that is not a marginal improvement. That is actually transformative. Okay. Now, so what does good identity governance look like inside Microsoft 365? And so let me walk you through the 4 layers that we have on our screens, right? First, we have phishing resistant MFA. And I want to be precise here because not all MFA is created equal, right? Something like SMS-based MFA, where you get a text message, with a 6-digit code, it's actually better than nothing, but it is vulnerable. So we have SIM swap attacks where someone convinces your mobile carrier to transfer your number to their device. They can intercept those codes, and we have also real-time phishing relays that can steal those particular codes mid-session, right? So phishing resistant MFA, which means FIDO2 security keys like YubiKey. We have, Windows Hello for Business using your face or fingerprint. Then you have passkeys. I actually use passkeys a lot. So passkeys stored in the Microsoft Authenticator app. It's actually cryptographically bound to a specific website and also your device. You cannot replay it, you cannot intercept it. It's probably the most secure authentication technology available at scale today. And you should be using it, especially for IT admins on the call, or if you hold any, privileged permission level within your organization. So if you're still on SMS multi-factor authentication, your immediate priority is to migrate to the Authenticator app with number matching enabled. So that addresses, the push bombing risk we actually discussed. So if you have high privileged users, I'm talking about admins, finance, executives, they should be on FIDO2 keys or even Windows Hello. Okay. Now, the second is conditional access policies, and this is something that is actually a favorite topic of mine. So this is your zero trust policy engine. We've had the concept of zero trust being, talked about in other engagements, talking about being able to verify explicitly, continuous verification, the principle of least privilege. So every single sign-in to every single application in your Microsoft 365 environment passes through a conditional access evaluation. So you define the conditions under which access is granted or denied, either by user, by application, by device, by network location, and even by risk level. So if a sign-in looks risky, it's coming from a new country, from an unmanaged device at an unusual hour. Conditional access can step up and demand strong authentication or even block the request entirely. So the most critical conditional access policy I see organization missing is one that simply blocks legacy authentication protocols. And as I mentioned earlier, it takes about 5 minutes to configure. It prevents the exact attack vector we described, using old legacy protocols to bypass MFA. 5 minutes, you have enormous impact. And if you're able to map out your security controls using conditional access policies, I guarantee you, it will help you automate most of the security things that you need to do within your environment and help you stay secure in more ways than you might actually think of. Then let's talk about privileged identity management. So this is how we deal with the privileged creep problem that we mentioned earlier. So when I talk about PIM, privileged identity management or PIM, it means that no administrator in your environment has standing administrative rights. So nobody wakes up on a Monday morning and opens their laptop as a global administrator. So when someone needs to perform an administrative task, they request a time-limited elevation. 1 hour, 4 hours, they provide a justification and the second person approves it. And when the time expires, the elevated access automatically gets revoked. And in some cases, and I've seen in many organizations, you can actually, keep it to 8 hours because maybe you need that, maybe that's your working window. So that at every given day, you have to get like new session tokens, right? So an attacker who compromises an admin account over the weekend finds an account with no standing admin permissions. So the blast radius is actually dramatically reduced. Remember, it's not only about just being able to secure our organizations and accounts, but we're also trying to see how long can any attacker get persistent access if they were to access our environment. So this is where conditional access policies and privileged identity management actually comes in. So it's able to, refresh that particular session, forcing the attacker to re-authenticate. Okay. Now, fourth, we have also identity lifecycle management, and this is where I usually talk to people to be able to automate it. So when an employee leaves, their account should not be disabled. Their account should be disabled, sorry. Their sessions should be revoked and their access reviewed within the hour, not even in 3 weeks when IT gets around to it. So when someone changes roles, access reviews should automatically trigger to evaluate whether they still need what they have. So this sounds administrative, but it's one of the highest impact security investment you can make. And much of it can be automated through Microsoft Entra ID. You can use, identity governance, lifecycle management. You can use PowerShell scripts. Because we've seen so many situations in which we've seen accounts active belonging to users who left 3 months ago. And you can actually see that those accounts were signed in as early as, yesterday or last week or a few hours ago. So question is, who's actually using that particular account? And is that actually a correct practice, right? So that's something that you need to be careful of. Yeah. So I hope everything is okay up to what we've just talked about. And I want us to switch our gears to, something that every organization deploying a Microsoft Copilot also needs to understand before they roll it out to one more user. Remember, we are trying to build up on the concepts as I move on. So as I move on, you'll see how everything actually now comes in together, okay? So I want to explain something using a framework that I usually call like a three-layered stack, because understanding this changes how you think about AI deployment, right? At the bottom of the stack is identity governance, and we've just spent a couple of minutes on it. It answers the question, who are you, what can you access, under what conditions, and for how long. Now, in the middle is data governance. This is the question: what data exists in your environment? How is it classified? And who should have access to it? How long should it be retained? Again, at the top is AI, specifically Microsoft Copilot in our case, and for the purposes of this particular presentation. Now, here's the crucial insight. Copilot doesn't have its own permission system. It doesn't make independent judgments about what's sensitive. It sees exactly what the logged in user can see. Nothing more, but critically, in our case, nothing else, nothing less. So every file that user can access, Copilot can also access. Every email thread, every document in SharePoint, every Teams conversation, every OneDrive folder. If there's a document from 3 years ago that contains sensitive HR data sitting in a SharePoint site that was shared too broadly when it was created, Copilot can find it and surface it in response to a question from any user with access to that site, right? So think about this. You deploy AI to increase productivity. But if the data governance underneath it is broken, if the identity governance is also broken, then AI doesn't just reflect those problems. It amplifies them at the speed, of a typically, large language model. So the risks that were dormant before, things to do with over-permissioned identities, unlabeled sensitive files, anonymous links, they actually become active the moment you switched on AI. So again, privilege creep, which was a theoretical risk, becomes a practical one at the moment Copilot can query all that access in a single prompt. So you cannot separate the AI strategy from, identity and data governance strategy. They are one and the same thing. Anyone who tells you otherwise really needs to attend some of our sessions. Yeah. So I want to quickly make this concrete with 5 scenarios that I see in the organizations that we work with. So each one shows what a governance gap looks like before AI and what it becomes after, right? So first we have over-permissioned identities. We talked about privilege creep. In a pre-copilot world, the risk was that an attacker who compromised that identity got broad access, right? In an AI world, the attacker doesn't even need to compromise anything. They just need to ask that AI that is in your organization a well-crafted question, and the answer synthesizes everything that over-permissioned identity can see into a single readable summary. So in your case, AI actually does reconnaissance for them, right? We have unlabeled sensitive files. Data loss prevention policies work on signals, things to do with sensitivity labels, specific data patterns, known sensitive information types. If a file isn't labeled, the policy doesn't trigger. This is especially for organizations that are huge, that work with a lot of sensitive information, right? If you do not use DLP policies in your organization, so the file will be invisible to your governance controls. Now, remember, it's not invisible to your Copilot because you as a user, you still have access to it. Still, Copilot will find it, read it, and use it, and use it in responses just the same. Again, this is something that we see happening a lot. Things to do with anonymous sharing links. You get the question, how come this particular data is out there? So these are the when you share something on Teams or SharePoint, this is where you choose, anyone with the link sharing option in SharePoint and OneDrive. So these links were probably created for a legitimate reason. Sharing a document with a contractor, making a file accessible for quick collaboration. Now, this is the problem. They are still live because nobody removed them. So Copilot treats that file as accessible to anyone who has access to that workspace. So if you're dealing in an organization and you have, sensitive functions. So this is something that you really need to be on the lookout for. Then we have the issue about stale guest accounts. Now, this is whereby you introduce third-party risk to your organization. That contractor from 18 months ago, they are still in your tenant. They still technically have access to, your SharePoint sites. So Copilot can be queried through that identity. So remember, forgotten doesn't mean that it's actually gone. Again, I mentioned about data loss prevention. So if you do not have DLP on Copilot prompts, this is the most counterintuitive one. So a user could type sensitive information, a client's personal data, confidential project details directly into a Copilot prompt. And in most cases, not, out of malice. They could just be, doing their day-to-day jobs. So without a DLP policy scoped to Copilot or even your AI solution, that prompt can be sent to web grounding services, incorporated into shared summaries, or even logged in ways that create compliance exposure. So the user isn't malicious, they're just using the tool. But the tool is moving sensitive data outside the governance boundary. So you see how that actually works. So these are 5 scenarios, and they all have one common theme: the governance that should have been in place before AI was deployed. So again, this also addressed the whole issue about secure AI adoption, right? Now, so how do we govern the data in Microsoft 365? So these what we have on our screen. So these are four ways in which we can actually do this, and they're all native to the platform that we already have. So we have sensitivity labels. So think of this as digital classification stamps. You have public, you have public, internal, you have confidential, highly confidential that travel. So these are tags that travel with a document wherever it goes. So they enforce encryption, they restrict sharing, they trigger watermarks, and most importantly for our purposes, they give Copilot a boundary, right? So, and I talked about DLP for Copilot, which actually also helps you enforce that which needs to be done. So they can block Copilot from grounding responses on sensitive content, and they can prevent prompts that contain personal data from being sent to external web services. So if you're deploying Copilot or any other AI service and you do not have DLP policies covering it, you're basically running an ungoverned AI. Full stop. So you need to make sure you have your data governance and identity governance in check. Then we have, of course, the oversharing remediation. So Microsoft provides a tool called SharePoint Advanced Management that runs permission reports across your entire tenant. And it also identifies every anonymous link. So this is something that you can see on your SharePoint admin center, right? So it's included also if you have the necessary license. So this is something that you should run even before you roll out AI within your organization. Then, of course, we have data lifecycle management. So all data in this case, it's actually not inert. So a SharePoint site from 2019 with confidential project files that nobody has opened in 4 years, that data is still there. Copilot can still find it if it contains customer data. You still have GDPR exposure. So archive it, delete it, then retain only what you are legally required to keep and no more. Okay. Yeah, so that was just a quick segue into the whole idea about data governance and AI. So I want us again now to switch into what we can do as users, right? I hope we are still moving on swiftly. I know this can be a lot of information at one go, but I know we got this. So technology controls only go so far, right? Now let's talk about the human layer. And there are 5 habits that every single person in your organization can start implementing right now, regardless of their technical background. right? So let's start with the use of Authenticator app, not SMS, not a phone call, the app. So if your IT team hasn't rolled it out yet, ask them to. And if they have, make sure every account is enrolled in it. SMS is, as we discussed, the weakest link in your MFA chain. Use passwordless authentication if possible, right? Because it's actually much more secure. Now, two, reject if you get an MFA prompt you did not ask for. Tap deny. Do not approve it to make it go away. Do not assume it was a glitch. Listen, and any unexpected MFA prompt means someone has your password and they're trying to authenticate right now. Tap deny, then call your IT team. That phone call might be intervention that even stops a breach. And if you're not sure, you can use sites like Have I Been Pwned to actually see if your email address, both your corporate and also personal, if they're actually available in any database that is actually out there, right? Then also think before you click, and that includes in Microsoft Teams. So we're establishing that phishing pages are now hosted on legitimate Microsoft domains. So a link from a colleague in Teams is not automatically saved, or a link that purports to come from another organization. So if you're not expecting it and it feels slightly off, if it's asking you to enter credentials somewhere unexpected, pause. Verify with the sender through, a separate channel before you click it. Of course. Now, share with specific people. Avoid the whole, sharing with anyone option. So every time you create an anonymous sharing link in SharePoint or OneDrive, you're creating a file that exists outside your governance boundary. So if someone forwards that link accidentally, or even the file ends up indexed somewhere it should not, or even an AI solution surfaces it to someone who wasn't supposed to see it. So share it with specific people, with named people. It takes a few seconds and it makes all the difference. Now, use a passphrase and a password manager. Remember, we had the whole, forget the 8-character password with a capital letter, a number, and a special character. Honestly, that model is actually broken. So you can use a forward passphrase, something like, Purple Cloud Engine 9, for instance, for example. That is just an example I thought of. So it's both easier to remember and exponentially harder to crack than, using the generic 8-character password. And use a password manager to generate unique credentials for every account. Password reuse is how credential stuffing attacks work. So you can imagine one breached database becomes access to 10 other services. And we are seeing this happening at a massive scale. So these are five habits. So none of them require a budget approval. None of them require an IT ticket. They just require a decision to be more deliberate about how we interact with technology. And that's it. Okay. Yeah. So let me close with something concrete. So this is not like a vision. This is not a framework. This is just simply an action plan. So, and we've broken it down by different types of audiences, and you can even scope it to 90 days. Now, for organizational leadership, request a cyber risk report that includes MFA coverage and patch latency as, your standing metrics at every board meeting. Commission a full MT65 identity and data governance audit before you approve the expansion of any AI or Copilot license. So you can review your cyber insurance policy against current, breach cost benchmarks. Your coverage might be significantly behind where it needs to be. And this is also how you actually find out where you need to invest, especially as far as your IT is concerned, your IT security. Now, for the IT and security teams, your first priority is to ensure that you enforce phishing resistant MFA for all users, especially for elevated users, and kill legacy authentication protocols in Exchange Online. So those two actions alone close the most exploited entry points in your environment. of course, then run a SharePoint Advanced Management Permission audit to remediate any anonymous links. So enable privileged identity management for all administrative roles. And in the case where you have Copilot in your environment, enable data security posture management for AI So this is available in Microsoft Purview. So this gives you a weekly risk assessment of your data estate. Now, for every employee and for all users, myself included, enroll in the Microsoft Authenticator app if you haven't already. Audit your own, OneDrive and SharePoint sites and remove, those, anyone links that do not exist. Participate in the next, phishing simulation that your IT teams run. So this is actually training, so it's not a trap. And also, label sensitive files you create using your organization sensitivity labels. This also applies to Outlook, okay? So as you can see, none of this requires a massive budget. Some of it doesn't even require any budget at all. It requires decisions. It requires, us to prioritize, and it requires the conviction that this matters enough to do today, rather than when something goes wrong. So we have to be proactive. And again, back to the IT security teams. So these are some of the things that you can actually do and create metrics to present to your organization leadership for them to give you the necessary support and the budgets to be able to implement some of these things. So here's a quick win you can use as your starting point. Open your Microsoft Secure Score in Entra ID, as soon as possible. It calculates your current security posture automatically and tells you exactly which actions will have the most impact. So it's already running in your tenant. So it just needs someone to look at it. Maybe I can show you how it looks like after this. Yeah, so I know we've covered a lot of ground today. So of course, again, like I mentioned, we'll leave you with three things. One is identity is your perimeter, so take care of it. AI amplifies governance gaps, so be sure to look at identity and data governance before you deploy AI within your environment. And the third, this is the one that I want you to really take away. So most of what I've described today is already in your Microsoft 365 license. So conditional access, privileged identity management, sensitivity labels, data loss prevention, all these things. So the investments have already been made. The question is whether you're using them. And of course, this is what we do. We help organizations move from having these tools to actually using them effectively, both from a compliance perspective and from an implementation and technical perspective. So if what we've discussed today has raised any questions about where your organization stands, we would like to continue with that conversation. Yeah, but for now, I think we have some time for questions, and we'd love to hear what's on your mind, what you think resonated, what challenged you, and what we did not cover that you need to understand. Remember, this is one of those, we usually try and keep it balanced. If you need a more technical deep dive, that is something that we can also be happy to do. If you need anything covered, that is also something that you can do. Yeah, so let us know what's on your mind, what challenges you have, and see how we can actually cover them. Okay, so thank you. That's it from me. Okay, I can see we have. Hi, Abigail.
I guess. Oh yeah. I can see we have a question from Monica, where she asked whether we'll be able to share this presentation. But for also to answer everyone else, yes, we're going to share the recording and the presentation after the session once the recording is also ready.
Okay.
Um,
Okay. Yeah. I'll send this to you, Abigail. Then you can be able to just distribute it to the attendees.
Thank you. Thank you. We'd also like to open up the floor to anyone who has any question. Feel free to engage with us. We'd love to hear your view, your questions, your concerns, your comments. Also, we're going to have a poll just to get a sense of what part of the department you are in your organization. So yeah, the floor is open. Sure, Annette is going to share the poll right now.
Okay. Okay.
Abigail, if anyone has a question, you can unmute them and then they can share their questions. But I'm going to launch a poll right now.
Yeah. Oh yeah, and by the way, one thing that you need to ask your particular providers, and that also includes us, is things to do with your licensing. You can also just let them know what kind of licenses you have, what they actually offer, what you're able to do with those particular licenses. And like I mentioned, if you need further guidance, be it from compliance, be it from implementation, be it from an assessment point of view, that is something that we can actually come in and also handle it for you. Be it things to do with security remediations, that is something that we can also cover for you. And also let us know what topics you would want us to cover next time, so that we see if we can also do that for you.
Um, Thank you so much, Gift, for the incredible session. I think we can all agree that your perspective, it really brings life to the cybersecurity journey, and it's very practical and relatable. We'll be sure to take the practices and the action plan that you just shared and implement them within our organizations. Um, I know people, I can't see any more questions just yet, but I know sometimes it takes time to be able to wrap your head around everything that we've shared today. So if you have any questions that do come to mind later, you can reach us through the contact where Gift has shared, or I'll also share my screen right now. Um, or if you also would like support in implementing what we've covered, you can also reach us through.
Okay.
Can we just through there? Or also look at the feedback link. Um, so before we close, I do also want to share that we have upcoming webinars very soon, and we'd love for you to join. Annette has shared a link to the webinars. Also, you can look at our website where the upcoming dates and topics that we're going to handle. So keep an eye out for that. Thank you once again for taking your time to be with us here today. Your presence and engagement means a lot to everyone here. So on behalf of the entire team and Gift, we really thank you for being here.
Yep.
So
No, thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for your time. And let's stay safe. Let's stay secure. Bye. Bye, everyone.
bye.
Bye.
Thank you.